All right, greetings everybody. Good afternoon for most of you. Good in the middle of the night for some of you. Um, Morning for us, of course, over here. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the events we don't care about, and just give you the 15-second background on this. In the last couple of years, we've really been focusing on, keyed instance in data vault modeling, um, identifying that these links can grow their own identity, and then it came I guess, a realization that most all linked relationships have some kind of an event basis behind them. As it turns out, they're just ones that we don't typically care about. So let's jump into that a little bit. So first of all, modeling, always about person, place, thing, event. Um, but is it really true that we model all these events? Is this something that we're identifying and modeling? So here, this example we may have seen once or twice before. You have a customer that you know owns a vehicle, and you're a window tinting service. Well, this link or this relationship now just says the customer owns a vehicle, which is fine. But you may ask, well, how did it come to be that they own this vehicle? Right now, there had to be an underlying event, and the event was probably some kind of a purchase. So they bought the vehicle. There's a sale, whatever. Um, Now, as it stands here, you can look at it and say, well, there's two different relationships here. And of course, that's one of the most important things we have involved today and in ensemble modeling is, of course, natural business relationship, but also unique and specific natural business relation. So here we have one that represents an event and the other one that actually represents an alignment or a status, right? So owns is just we're in the status now, or we have a state established, right? And to get back to Lars's point earlier, there's a posit about this that says this customer owns this vehicle. But we haven't gotten into the idea of the event around the purchase. Now, if we did, of course, we could, and we can get into, okay, there was a sale event, there was probably a store or a shop, there was an employee involved, there's probably other factors involved there. There was a date, there's a certain price, there's insurance, driver's license number of the what our customer, whatever. Uh, the whole event around sale is something that is implied in the other relationship, right? They're not the same here. But as it turns out, most of the time we don't care in this case because all we're doing is getting the end state, the alignment that says, yeah, this customer owns this vehicle. That's all I care about, right? Let's look at another example. Let's say we're Home Depot Hardware, which that's the big chain we have here in the US. And you have employee manages a store. You just want to know for the store who's the manager. That's it. It's not a big deal. But that's also an end state of something else that occurred. There had to have been some kind of an assignment event, some kind of a manager that decided it's going to be this employee managing the store, right? So some kind of an assignment got made. That happened on a certain date. There was probably a reason for it. It has an effective date. Maybe it's a provisional note on there. But again, these events that created that, we don't care about. So as we don't care, we just end up with the end state manages. Okay, that's just, we're leaving it at that for now. It could also be that the manager, of course, is managing an employee. So, if you're an employee working for an organization, you typically have a hierarchy and there's some kind of manager. Same kind of thing here, of course, is somebody had to make that assignment that this is your manager, right? How did that come to be? What was the reason? When was it effective? Again, we just don't care. So that's another event we just drop off, as it were. So it's not there. And what we're left with here again is I'm using these kind of words quite frequently now, but if you say there's an alignment, there's a configuration, there's an end state, there's a status, if you want to leave it as that, that determines where these things are. Now, of course, in vault modeling, we say, well, if you change manager, right? If you get a different manager, of course, because we track history, that's where we pop up our interesting conversation around LSATs. But drop that for now. We're not going to get into the details of that for this very minute. Although in Q&A time, that might be an interesting one to circle back to. But for now, let's blow that one off. Let's take another facet of the same model for Home Depot. This manager is also this employee. And remember, we talk about this, of course, a lot in CBC, core business concept discussions, because we're not going to abstract to like involved party. We're going to have specific CBCs because they are different from each other. Now, clearly, something like employee and customer are very different, but it could also be in this organization that manager is also very different. So they end up with a different ensemble, right, for the two. So an is also, or kind of a same as between concepts, is a common thing to do, right? But what about that one? Well, the employee was promoted, is maybe the underlying event here, because the employee worked for the organization for some time, and then they actually got promoted to being a manager. Well, it turns out, interestingly, we do care about this one, right? So all of a sudden we're saying, yeah, you know what, that's interesting to me. I care about tracking as the next subject area in my warehouse. I'm actually interested to know about the promotion process because for whatever reasons, fill in the reasons. We want to know the characteristics of who, what, where, when, what director makes these decisions, why, based on what, to get into how our HR organization works in our company. So cool. Now, because we do care about it, does that mean we want to get rid of this one? And well, no, it doesn't, because the two are different relationships. One of them relates to an event-based header relation that says, hey, I'm all the things you need to know, kind of in this case as a header level, about this promotion event that occurred. The other one is still a status state of, hey, this employee is this manager, right? It's just an alignment, which is perfectly fine to keep. And as a reiteration, right, just reiterate this again, in all forms of ensemble, circular relationships are not an issue, of course, because all these relationships are natural business relationships. So we can expect there to be multiple relationships tying together the same set of concepts. That's a big part of our agility pattern, right? We have to be able to build incrementally. So that's a big part of what we do. Interesting. So now we know that the model is expanded through this next iteration. But now check this out. Now we've got a satellite for promotion that says we took into account the reviews that this employees had, the incidents, if there were any, that we needed to look at, decisions that this employee has made over time that were, well, what was the net effect of those? Were they good decisions? And then also praise or comments that maybe came from customer feedback about this employee. So these are all facets that were taken into consideration. Well, now these are just, well, in this case, captured as context around the event of a promotion, but there's more, right? Because each of those represents not just an event, but maybe multiple other events. Let's take a look at just this satellite, which is, again, not something crazy that we would track. And it says reviews, incidents, decisions, and praise. Well, reviews, if we track them, right, that's its own model. Now you've got a manager, an employee, there's an annual review, there's a result, there's progress on it. What are they working on? Have they been on probation? HR feedback, salary adjustments, what decisions do they make? That comes back to other things we're tracking here. The date, the years of service, effective date for the promotion, any notes. This is not out of line. You know, maybe this is important for us to track. Maybe it's not. I'm not sure. That's something it could be. Incidents. Well, yeah, incident reports are important, right? I mean, something happened. Well, what was it? What type of incident was it? Who was it reported by? What was the end results? Who was responsible? What's the date? When was it reported? When was the incident date itself? What was the effective date of it? What category is it? What did we do to mitigate the issue? What's the plan? And then was there, maybe these are flags, a suspension or probation associated with this incident? Well, guess what? come 2-3 years down the road, maybe tracking all this information about incidents is important to you. It could be, right? Decisions made. Well, one of the decisions made might be do we want to track these incident reports? I don't know. But the point is here, employee decisions made, if we track them, and of course, customer feedback is another business model that may come in at some point. And there is, the feedback itself that came in, and who was involved, and what was it, praised or not, which is good. Like, it could have, of course, been a negative comment. And then, was it related to a particular sale? If so, what sale? Keyed instance on that, because you want to know what aspect of the sale or what category, what note about that sale was important. Was it related to a support call? Was it related to a product? Its own business model. Well, how about this? How about if we just say, we don't care? And by the way, keep in mind, we're doing this all the time, right? We're doing this all the time. We have linked relationships with underlying events, and we have satellite attributes with underlying events. And in these cases, we blow them off, right? We just say, hey, let's get it. We don't care, at least not yet. At least not yet, right? Because remember, our whole basis of what we do, and we kicked off this Swedish afternoon after lunch, right? Talking about integration with Patrik Lager, and a lot of the discussion had to do with the types of changes that can occur. And, are there foundational changes that occur? And if they are, how do we adapt to them? But of course, the model should constantly adapt to change. That's the whole idea of what we do, right? So we should be able to build incrementally. So for now, we're just going to say, well, this is the way the model looks. There could be in the future additional events attached here. Could be additional events attached here. Could be additional event structures and subject areas added to any one of these. But at least for now, just now, we don't care, right? So we're not getting into that yet, right? So concepts and relationships, obviously, that's all modeling, right? Event, person, place, thing. We do this in all forms of modeling. And then relationships is related to in some particular way, in some unique, specific way. Here, just a list of possible relationships that we have. And again, just getting back to a little bit of vault class, but we want to name these unique, specific relationships because there could be more than one between the same concepts. We want to know what is embodied in this relationship we're looking at. And of course, there's thousands of examples here. I mean, this is just a couple for fun. I highlighted is associated with. That's very, very common. It's like customer associated with a sale, product associated with a class, whatever. Is shipped to. That's just telling you where it's going for an address, but we don't get into the shipping event. Something that's required, and then of course manages, owns, judges. We touched on those earlier, and of course plenty more on this list, right? Now we can also add the idea of context, like we did with the satellite, with the 4 attributes. Descriptive attributes and associated aspects of whatever the CBC is. Well, these things, again, might include, of course, like name, last name, hire date, attrition date, influencer rating, whatever. As we know, it's possible for an entity, for a CBC, a core business concept, for a dimension, to have hundreds and hundreds of attributes that describe them in some way, that have a relationship of key dependency for that concept instance, right? That's very possible to do. But even if we take a brief look at this hire date, well, there was a hiring process. If something is available, was it shipped in? How did it get there? Who decided we should carry it? If something is back ordered, of course, that there's a back order event. We track that, find out where it came from what supplier. Price, somebody had to set the price. There was someone who did the product positioning, right? The 4 Ps or whatever, 3 Ps of product positioning, and then said, okay, we determine this is not going to be a cost leader price, this is going to be a premium price, and blah, blah, blah. All these things have underlying events. Of course, marital status is another one. if a customer's married to an employee, there's an underlying event of a wedding that occurred there. So again, context, descriptive attributes, associated topics. To make it even more fun for us, right? Because we like fun. In a data warehouse, all this shit can change. Everything here is now can change. So it's not just a matter of giving it to you one time and saying, here's the last name of this customer, right? But that, which could imply, by the way, of course, something like a wedding. But if that changes during the life cycle of you managing it, because we're tracking history, then of course there was a triggered event that caused that to change. Every status you have implies that there was a change, right? And if we're tracking the history of something along the way, then of course those are all underlying events, change events. Are we getting into those or not? And that's where it gets really interesting on the links, right? And LSATs, because just a date is one thing, but then now because we're interested, are we really starting to think that we're talking about the instance of an event or not? At what point does it branch off and become its own subject area or its own event-based ensemble, right? That's an important one to look at. What's the bottom line? Well, the bottom line, of course, is always important. The events we don't care about vastly outnumber the events that we do care about. And when I say do care about, that is the ones that show up in your model. Think about that for a minute. If you go back after this at some point and look at your model, take a look at those linked relationships, take a look at the attributes you have, and look to discover what are the underlying events that eventually resulted, that created the value you see in those linked relations or in those attributes. And then you're going to find, as I did looking at a bunch of models, there's vastly more of those than the ones we're actually capturing, right? Which is really fascinating because obviously there's some kind of a design pattern here of us, recognizing or not recognizing, but understanding that there are ones to be blown off, right? And of course, the easy driver is, does business care and have they told us they want to know anything about it? That's an easy one. But what it means for all of us is we need to be the ones to determine, right? Get my thing down here. Determine if you need that end state status, the resulting association, or do you need the underlying event? And with a twist of fate here, right? Because we're in data warehousing, you may start with the top part. It's just the association that resulted. And then as the future unfolds, you now need to know the underlying event, right? And that's where the tricky part is because you can't allow or let, because it won't work, right? A simple attribute in a satellite or the existence of a particular link that represents an end state or a status spawn an event without the instance of that actual event occurring. That gets back down to where we started, which is this is what we model, right? And of course, this is saying we're modeling not all of it, okay? Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go back to this slide in a minute, but because we have 1 minute and 20 seconds left in my 20 minutes, I tried to pull a Martin Evers here, but really fast through my slide deck, semi-succeeded, I think. So let's look at that marriage one again, right? So employees married to customer. Of course, and by the way, this is something you may need to know just for, risk reasons in a bank, for example. You might want to know that. There's a wedding event that occurred with a date, an event, a venue, an officiant, a theme, a wedding party of lots of people, guests, lots of people, wedding song, band, DJ, whatever. We don't care. I'm not going to get into that topic. The point is we already know there's an underlying event. But just for fun, after looking at Lars's presentation, I just thought it's interesting to tie those two together because here we can see that this is basically representing the positive, and in this case, probably wrong, Lars, you can correct me. Employee, customer, married. It's probably in this case, husband, wife, or husband, whatever is the roles that are important in this posit. But the point is that even just recognizing that this is a end state, not the actual wedding event itself, right?